The construction site in Dubai Sports City stood silent under the October moon, its half-built towers reaching toward the glittering skyline like concrete fingers clawing at the darkness. Workers had gone home hours ago, leaving behind only the skeletal remains of what would become another luxury residential complex. But on the night of October 15, 2019, this abandoned site became the stage for a discovery that would expose one of the most shocking cases of betrayal, disease, and murder in Dubai's corporate world. When police arrived at 6 a.m. on October 18th, following up on a missing person report, they expected to find nothing more than construction debris and empty scaffolding. Instead, beneath a carefully arranged pile of tarps and steel pipes, they discovered the battered body of 24-year-old Nadia Kassab. The young Lebanese receptionist had been missing for 3 days, and the brutal injuries to her head told a story of rage, desperation, and deadly violence. But this wasn't just another workplace tragedy or random act of violence. This was the explosive conclusion to a secret affair that had consumed 2 lives, destroyed multiple families, and revealed the deadly consequences of a disease that neither victim saw coming. Have you ever wondered how far someone might go to protect their reputation? How many lies they'd tell, how many people they'd hurt, just to keep their perfect life from crumbling? The man responsible for Nadia's death seemed to have everything: a successful career managing multimillion-dollar real estate projects, a beautiful family living in Dubai's most exclusive neighborhood, and a salary that most people could only dream of. Yet beneath this facade of success, a toxic combination of lust, deception, and fear had been building toward this moment of deadly violence. What if I told you that this wasn't even the worst secret hiding behind the marble facades of Dubai's corporate towers? What if the affair that started this whole nightmare was just the beginning, and the real horror came when both people involved discovered they were carrying a deadly disease that would change everything? This is the story of Rashid Al-Mansouri, a 42-year-old senior project manager who thought he could have it all: his respectable family life and his forbidden romance with a young receptionist. But when their affair led to a devastating medical diagnosis, Rashid faced an impossible choice that would ultimately drive him to commit the unthinkable. Before we continue, I need to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, and if this story grabs your attention, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about how quickly a perfect life can collapse into deadly chaos. The clock was ticking, secrets were multiplying, and in the end, only one person would walk away alive. Meet Rashid Al-Mansouri, and I'm currently 42 years old. If you had seen me in early 2019, you would have thought I represented the absolute pinnacle of success in Dubai's competitive business world. My corner office on the 34th floor of Emerald Heights development overlooked the pristine waters of Dubai Marina, where million-dollar yachts bobbed gently in their berths like floating symbols of achievement. Every morning, I drove my black Range Rover from our villa in Arabian Ranches to the office, passing landmarks that reminded me of projects I had helped bring to life. The Burj Khalifa, the Palm Jumeirah, these weren't just tourist attractions to me. They were proof that Dubai rewarded those who worked hard and dreamed big. My annual package of 800,000 dirhams placed me in the top 5% of earners in the emirate, and my reputation as a senior project manager who could handle complex developments had taken 15 years to build. At home, my wife Layla maintained our household with the efficiency of a military operation. She managed our 3 children's school schedules, extracurricular activities, and social calendars while keeping our villa pristine for the dinner parties and business gatherings that were essential to maintaining our status in Dubai's tight-knit professional community. Our children, ages 8, 11, and 13, attended the best international schools, spoke multiple languages, and had already been exposed to opportunities that most kids around the world could never imagine. From the outside, we were the definition of the Dubai dream realized. Layla posted perfectly curated photos on social media showing our weekend trips to luxury resorts in Ras Al Khaimah, our children's achievements at school, and the beautiful home we had created together. Friends and colleagues often commented on how blessed we were, how we had managed to build exactly the kind of life that people moved to Dubai hoping to achieve. But success has a way of creating its own prison bars. The truth was that somewhere between the mortgage payments, the children's school fees, the business dinners, and the constant pressure to maintain our lifestyle, I had lost something essential. My marriage had evolved into a well-oiled machine focused on logistics rather than love. Conversations with Layla revolved around schedules, budgets, and responsibilities. We functioned as business partners managing a household rather than lovers sharing a life. I began staying later at the office, not because the work demanded it, but because the silence of my empty office felt more comfortable than the predictable routine waiting for me at home. I told myself that I was building something bigger, working toward an even more successful future for my family. But deep down, I was running from the growing emptiness that success hadn't filled. My days became a performance. I played the role of the devoted husband at social gatherings, the dedicated father at school events, and the ambitious executive in boardroom meetings. But when I looked in the mirror each morning, I saw a man who had achieved everything he thought he wanted and still felt fundamentally unsatisfied. This restlessness made me vulnerable in ways I didn't recognize at the time. I started noticing things I had previously ignored: the way other couples interacted, the excitement in younger colleagues' voices when they talked about their relationships, the energy that seemed to be missing from my own life. I convinced myself that I deserved more than the routine existence I had created. What I didn't realize was that this dissatisfaction was about to make me susceptible to a temptation that would destroy not just my marriage, but multiple lives in ways I could never have imagined. Because in January 2019, everything I thought I knew about my carefully controlled world was about to be challenged by a 24-year-old receptionist whose smile would become both my obsession and ultimately my downfall. The stage was set for a catastrophe that would prove that no amount of wealth, status, or success could protect me from the consequences of the choices I was about to make. The first time I saw Nadia Kassab, she was struggling with the company's new phone system. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to transfer a call that kept disconnecting. It was a Monday morning in late January 2019, and I had come to the main office to discuss budget allocations with the finance team. Most days, I worked from client sites or our satellite office, so visits to the Marina headquarters were infrequent enough that I noticed changes. Nadia was definitely a change. At 24 years old, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that didn't require the expensive maintenance routines that many women in Dubai's professional circles considered essential. Her dark hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and when she finally managed to complete that troublesome phone transfer, her smile transformed her entire face with genuine warmth and relief. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her desk. "You're new here, aren't you?" She looked up with those striking green eyes, a genetic gift from her Lebanese heritage, and nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm Nadia. I started 2 weeks ago, and I'm still learning all the systems. I'm sorry if I kept you waiting." Her accent carried just a hint of Arabic inflection, softened by careful English pronunciation that suggested she had worked hard to perfect her professional communication skills. There was something refreshing about her eagerness to please, her genuine concern about doing a good job. In a company where most employees had become comfortable, even complacent, Nadia's fresh enthusiasm stood out like a splash of color on a gray canvas. "No need to apologize," I told her. "These systems can be tricky. I'm Rashid Al-Mansouri, Senior Project Manager. If you ever need help with anything, don't hesitate to ask." Over the following weeks, I found myself creating reasons to visit the main office. A document that could have been emailed suddenly required in-person delivery. Meetings that could have been handled via video conference became essential face-to-face discussions. Each time, I made a point of stopping by Nadia's desk, ostensibly to check how she was settling in, but really to experience those few moments of genuine interaction that felt so different from the calculated conversations that filled my daily routine. Nadia had come to Dubai with dreams that mirrored those of thousands of young professionals who saw the Emirate as a launching pad for better opportunities. She had studied business administration at the American University of Beirut, but found limited prospects in Lebanon's struggling economy. Dubai represented hope, a place where hard work could translate into financial independence and career advancement. She lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in International City, sharing space with 3 other Lebanese women who worked various jobs around the city. Her portion of the rent consumed nearly half her monthly salary, leaving little for the lifestyle she saw displayed around her every day. Designer boutiques, luxury restaurants, weekend trips to beach resorts. These remained aspirational goals that motivated her to accept extra shifts and volunteer for additional responsibilities. When a senior executive like me showed interest in her professional development, it felt like validation that her sacrifices were worthwhile. I began suggesting training courses that could enhance her skill set, mentioning opportunities for advancement within the company, and offering insights into how Dubai's business world operated. To Nadia, these conversations represented exactly the kind of mentorship she had hoped to find. But I was lying to myself about my motivations. The truth was that talking with Nadia had become the highlight of my office visits. Her questions about Dubai life, her excitement about small achievements, her gratitude for guidance. These interactions reminded me of a younger version of myself, when building a career felt like an adventure rather than a burden. She listened to my advice with genuine appreciation, laughed at my stories about early career mistakes, and treated me like someone worth admiring rather than simply enduring. By early March, our conversations had extended beyond professional topics. I found myself sharing observations about Dubai's cultural nuances, recommending restaurants she might enjoy, asking about her family back in Lebanon. These exchanges felt harmless, a senior employee helping a newcomer navigate her new environment. Have you ever noticed how the most dangerous temptations don't announce themselves with warning signs and red flags? They approach quietly, disguised as innocent interactions, building trust and emotional connection before revealing their true nature. The line between mentorship and personal interest was about to blur in ways that would fundamentally alter both our lives, setting in motion a series of events that would end with devastating consequences neither of us could have anticipated. What started as workplace pleasantries was evolving into something far more dangerous. The transition from professional mentorship to personal attraction happened so gradually that I convinced myself each boundary crossing was natural, even innocent. By mid-March 2019, our conversations had shifted from company policies and career advice to more intimate territory. My frustrations with the endless demands of executive life, her homesickness for Lebanon's mountains, the loneliness that comes with being far from family. Would you like to continue this conversation over coffee? I asked one afternoon after we had spent 20 minutes discussing the challenges of maintaining authentic relationships in Dubai's status-conscious social environment. There's a quiet place in JBR where we could talk without office interruptions. Nadia hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to notice the internal debate playing across her features, before nodding. That sounds nice. I don't really know many places around the city yet. That first coffee meeting stretched into 3 hours. We sat in a corner booth at a cafe overlooking the beach, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely heard. Nadia asked thoughtful questions about my projects, my perspective on Dubai's rapid development, my thoughts on balancing ambition with personal fulfillment. She shared stories about growing up in Beirut, her family's sacrifices to fund her education, her determination to build a life that would make their investment worthwhile. When I mentioned feeling trapped by the expectations that came with success, she didn't offer empty platitudes or quick solutions. Instead, she listened with the kind of focused attention that had become rare in my daily interactions. At home, conversations competed with children's homework questions, television programs, and the constant mental checklist of household responsibilities. In business meetings, everyone was calculating angles and positioning themselves advantageously. But with Nadia, I could express doubts and vulnerabilities without judgment or agenda. Sometimes I wonder if I built the life I thought I wanted, or the life everyone expected me to want, I admitted during that first coffee meeting. Maybe the beautiful thing about being successful is that you have the power to change what comes next, she replied. Not everyone gets that choice. Those words stayed with me for days. Here was a young woman who had risked everything to pursue her dreams, while I, with all my advantages and resources, felt constrained by my own achievements. The contrast made me question assumptions I had held for years about duty, responsibility, and personal happiness. Our coffee meetings became weekly events, then twice weekly, always at different locations to avoid establishing a routine that might attract attention. I told Layla that these extended absences were client meetings, site visits, or networking obligations, explanations she accepted without question since my work had always required irregular hours and extensive travel. By April, the emotional intimacy had created a foundation for physical attraction that neither of us acknowledged directly but both felt intensely. I found myself noticing details about Nadia that had nothing to do with professional interaction. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the subtle fragrance of her perfume, the genuine warmth in her laugh when she found something truly amusing. I began bringing her small gifts disguised as helpful gestures. A book about Dubai's history that I thought she might enjoy. A gift card to a department store where she could buy professional clothing. Cash to help with transportation costs, since taking taxis to meet me was straining her budget. Each offering came with plausible explanations about supporting her professional development, but we both understood the subtext. Nadia had never been involved with a married man before, and the moral complexity of our growing connection clearly troubled her. During one of our meetings in late April, she addressed the issue directly. "Rashid, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Are you happy in your marriage?" The question I had been avoiding, even in my own thoughts, hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or retreat from. The honest answer was complicated. Layla and I weren't unhappy in any dramatic sense. We functioned well as partners, maintained mutual respect, and shared genuine love for our children. But the passion, excitement, and sense of possibility that I felt with Nadia had been absent from our relationship for years. "My marriage is stable," I said finally. "But stability isn't the same as fulfillment." That conversation opened the door to physical intimacy. The next week, instead of meeting at a cafe, I booked a room at a hotel in Jumeirah. I told myself this was just an extension of our emotional connection, a natural progression that didn't necessarily threaten my family or my commitment to providing for my children. The self-deception required to maintain both relationships simultaneously demanded increasingly elaborate lies and careful schedule management. I created fictional business trips, imaginary client emergencies, and non-existent training seminars to explain my absences. Technology helped. I could send Layla photos from genuine business locations while actually spending time with Nadia, creating an illusion of transparency while practicing sophisticated deception. For 3 months, I managed to sustain this double life, believing I could somehow have both the security of my established family and the excitement of this new relationship. If you've ever told yourself that you could control a dangerous situation just a little longer, you understand how easily we convince ourselves that temporary deception won't have permanent consequences. But lies have their own momentum, and by July 2019, that momentum was about to collide with a revelation that would make controlling the situation impossible. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late July while I was reviewing construction schedules for our Al Bersha project. Nadia's voice sounded different, strained, almost hollow, when she asked if we could meet immediately. She had been feeling unwell for several weeks, symptoms she had initially dismissed as exhaustion from working extra hours and the stress of maintaining our secret relationship. "I can't discuss this over the phone," she said. "Please, I need to see you now." I canceled my afternoon meetings and met her at a small cafe near her apartment in International City, far from any location where we might encounter colleagues or acquaintances. The moment I saw Nadia, I knew something was seriously wrong. She had lost weight, her usual vibrant complexion appeared ashen, and dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping properly. "I've been to the doctor," she began without preamble, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her untouched coffee cup. "Actually, I've been to several doctors over the past 2 weeks." My stomach tightened with a premonition of disaster, though my mind couldn't yet process what kind of news would require this level of obvious distress. "The symptoms started about 3 weeks ago," Nadia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Persistent fatigue, fever that comes and goes, swollen glands in my neck. I thought maybe I was just working too hard, not getting enough rest. But then I developed this rash, and the fever got worse." She paused, looking directly at me with an expression that combined fear, anger, and something that looked like betrayal. "They ran comprehensive blood tests, Rashid, including tests for sexually transmitted infections." The world seemed to stop moving. Cars continued driving past the cafe window. Other customers continued their conversations, but everything felt suspended as I waited for words I somehow already knew were coming. I tested positive for HIV. Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. HIV, the diagnosis that could destroy everything. Not just our secret relationship, but potentially my marriage, my health, my children's future, my entire carefully constructed life. That's impossible, I heard myself saying, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew how naive they sounded. There must be a mistake. You should get retested. Nadia's expression hardened. I've been tested 3 times at different clinics. The results are consistent. And since you're the only person I've been intimate with in the past 8 months, there's really only one explanation for how this happened. The accusation in her voice was unmistakable, and suddenly I found myself on the defensive despite having no clear understanding of how this situation could have developed. Nadia, I swear to you I had no idea. I would never knowingly? So you're saying you didn't know? She interrupted. Because that means either you infected me without knowing you were positive, or I got this somewhere else. And since I haven't been with anyone else, we both know which explanation makes sense. The logic was inescapable, but accepting it meant confronting possibilities I wasn't prepared to face. When had I last been tested for anything beyond routine health screenings? Years, possibly. My marriage had been monogamous, or so I had believed, until this affair began. Could Layla have been unfaithful without my knowledge? Had there been some other exposure I couldn't remember or hadn't considered significant? You need to get tested immediately, Nadia continued, her voice gaining strength as anger replaced vulnerability. And you need to tell me the truth about your sexual history, because right now I'm trying to understand how a supposedly faithful married man managed to give me a life-threatening disease. The drive home that evening felt like traveling through a nightmare. Every traffic light, every familiar landmark, every mundane detail of my regular route seemed surreal when viewed through the lens of this potential catastrophe. How could I explain to Layla that I needed comprehensive STD testing without revealing the affair that necessitated it? How could I continue sleeping next to her, maintaining physical intimacy, while potentially carrying a virus that could destroy her health? I spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to Layla's peaceful breathing beside me, calculating the timeline of our affair against Nadia's symptoms and trying to construct scenarios where this diagnosis might not be my fault. But every rational analysis led to the same conclusion. If Nadia had contracted HIV, and if I was her only recent sexual partner, then I was almost certainly infected as well. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first time I had used a sick day for anything other than actual illness in over 5 years, and went to a private clinic in Dubai that advertised complete confidentiality for sensitive medical issues. I paid extra for expedited results and used a false name, terrified that somehow this information might find its way back to my employer or my family. The wait for results felt like an eternity compressed into 48 hours. I moved through my normal routine like an actor playing a role, discussing school events with the children, reviewing household budgets with Layla, attending a client meeting that felt completely meaningless given what I might be facing. When the clinic called with my results on Friday afternoon, I was sitting in my car in the parking garage of our office building. The nurse's professional but sympathetic tone told me everything before she spoke the actual words. "Mr. Ahmed," she said, using the false name I had provided, "I'm calling with your test results. I'm afraid you've tested positive for HIV antibodies. You'll need to come in immediately to discuss treatment options and next steps." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the car floor. In that moment, sitting alone in the concrete darkness of an underground garage, my perfect life officially ended and something much more dangerous began. The HIV diagnosis transformed me into someone I didn't recognize. Within hours of receiving the results, I had morphed from a confident executive into a man consumed by terror, calculating every interaction, every conversation, every moment of my existence around one central question. How long could I maintain this secret before it destroyed everything? The immediate medical reality was manageable, according to the doctor at the private clinic. HIV treatment had advanced dramatically in recent years. With proper antiretroviral therapy, people could live normal lifespans and maintain undetectable viral loads that made transmission extremely unlikely. But these facts provided little comfort when weighed against the social, professional, and personal catastrophe that discovery would bring. I began taking medication in secret, storing pills in my office desk drawer and timing doses around business meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was treating a life-threatening illness while living a lie that felt equally deadly to my sense of self. Every morning, I swallowed pills that would help preserve my physical health while maintaining deceptions that were destroying my mental stability. The most immediate crisis involved Layla. We had been intimate just 5 days before my diagnosis, following our usual patterns of married life. Now I faced an impossible calculation. Should I confess everything and insist she get tested, potentially saving her health but definitely ending our marriage? Or should I find ways to avoid physical contact while secretly monitoring her for symptoms, protecting our family structure but risking her life? I chose a middle path that satisfied neither moral imperative. I began making excuses to avoid intimacy, claiming exhaustion from work stress, scheduling late meetings that kept me at the office until she was asleep, even booking unnecessary business trips to minimize opportunities for physical contact. When Layla expressed concern about our reduced frequency of intimacy, I blamed the pressures of managing 3 major development projects simultaneously. "You've seemed distant lately," she mentioned one evening after the children had gone to bed. "Is everything all right with work? You're putting in even longer hours than usual." "Just some challenging deadlines," I replied, unable to meet her eyes while delivering this partial truth. "Once we get through the next quarter, things should normalize." Meanwhile, Nadia was deteriorating both physically and emotionally. The HIV progression appeared more aggressive than typical cases, possibly due to delayed diagnosis or individual immune system factors. She missed work frequently, and when she did come to the office, her appearance made colleagues whisper about whether she might have a serious illness. More dangerous for me was her increasing bitterness about our situation. She blamed me entirely for her condition, convinced that I had knowingly exposed her to the virus. Her text messages became accusatory and threatening, demanding financial support for medical expenses and threatening to expose our affair if I didn't take responsibility for her treatment costs. "You destroyed my life," read one message that arrived during a client presentation. "The least you can do is help me pay for the medications that are keeping me alive." Another message, sent at 2 a.m. when her insomnia was particularly severe. "Your wife deserves to know what kind of man she's married to. Maybe it's time for some honesty in your perfect little family." These communications sent my anxiety levels through the roof. I changed my phone's notification settings to prevent messages from appearing on the screen when others might see them. I started checking my personal phone obsessively during meetings, terrified that Nadia might send something explicit or threatening while colleagues were nearby. The financial demands escalated quickly. HIV medications were expensive, even with insurance, and Nadia's reduced work schedule meant her income had dropped significantly. She expected me to cover not only her medical costs but also her living expenses, arguing that since I had caused her illness, I bore responsibility for its consequences. I began withdrawing cash in small amounts from multiple ATM locations, careful not to create obvious patterns that might trigger questions from Layla about our household budget. 500 dirhams here, 300 there, always with plausible explanations about client entertainment or office expenses that required cash payments. But money wasn't solving the fundamental problem. It was only buying temporary quiet from someone whose emotional state was becoming increasingly unstable. Nadia's messages revealed a woman who felt she had lost everything: her health, her career prospects, her dreams of building a successful life in Dubai. In her mind, I represented the person responsible for this catastrophic turn, and her anger was building toward something that felt dangerous. By early October, I was spending most of my mental energy managing this crisis instead of focusing on work or family. I was making mistakes in project management, forgetting important meetings, and struggling to maintain the professional competence that had built my reputation over 15 years. The pressure was becoming unbearable, and I was beginning to view Nadia not as a victim of circumstances we had both created, but as an active threat to everything I had worked to build. That perception would prove deadly for both of us. The decision formed slowly, like a poison crystallizing in my mind over weeks of sleepless nights and mounting desperation. By mid-October, Nadia's demands had become impossible to sustain. She wanted 20,000 dirhams immediately for experimental treatments not covered by standard insurance. She threatened to call Layla directly if I didn't agree to a formal support arrangement that would essentially make me responsible for her living expenses indefinitely. "I'm done playing games, Rashid," she said during what would become our final phone conversation. "Either you take responsibility for what you did to me, or I take responsibility for making sure everyone knows the truth about who you really are." The threat wasn't subtle. She was prepared to destroy my marriage, my relationship with my children, my professional reputation, and my standing in Dubai's business community. In her deteriorating mental state, she seemed to view mutual destruction as preferable to suffering alone. On October 15th, I sent her a text message that would later become evidence in my murder trial. "Let's meet tonight to discuss a permanent solution. Construction site at Dubai Sports City project. 8 p.m. Come alone." The location wasn't chosen randomly. Our company's residential development in Dubai Sports City had been stalled for 3 months due to permit complications. The partially completed towers stood empty after working hours, surrounded by construction barriers that blocked visibility from surrounding roads. Security patrols visited the site only twice per night, at predictable intervals I knew from reviewing safety protocols. I arrived 30 minutes early, parking my Range Rover in shadows between 2 concrete mixers where surveillance cameras couldn't capture the license plate clearly. The construction site felt like an alien landscape under the harsh illumination of temporary work lights. Skeletal buildings reaching toward the sky, construction equipment sitting motionless like sleeping giants, piles of materials covered by weatherproof tarps. Nadia arrived precisely on time, walking slowly across the uneven ground in shoes poorly suited for a construction environment. Even from a distance, I could see that her health had declined significantly since our last face-to-face meeting. She moved carefully, like someone conserving energy for essential tasks. "You said you wanted to discuss a permanent solution," she said without greeting, her voice carrying clearly in the empty space around us. "I hope that means you're finally ready to do the right thing." "I am," I replied, though we clearly had different definitions of what constituted appropriate action. "But first I need you to understand something about my situation." For 20 minutes, we stood among the construction debris arguing about responsibility, about fairness, about the future. I tried explaining that supporting her indefinitely would require sacrificing my children's security and education. She countered that my children weren't facing a life-threatening illness caused by their father's selfish choices. "You gave me a death sentence," she said, her voice rising with anger that had been building for months. "The least you can do is help me live with it. But if you won't, then maybe your wife and children deserve to know what kind of person they're living with." Those words triggered something fundamental in my psychological state. The explicit threat to involve my family, delivered with calm certainty that she would follow through, activated a survival instinct that overwhelmed rational thought. The steel pipe used for scaffolding was lying within arm's reach. I don't remember making a conscious decision to pick it up. I don't remember the first blow that sent Nadia stumbling backward into a pile of construction materials. But I remember clearly the moment when she looked up at me with blood running from her scalp and said, "You're going to kill me, aren't you?" The question hung in the air between us for what felt like an eternity. Then I brought the pipe down again, and again until she stopped moving. In the immediate aftermath, standing over her motionless body in the harsh artificial lighting of the construction site, I felt something that terrified me more than the crime itself: relief. The problem that had been consuming my life for months was finally solved. The relief I felt standing over Nadia's body lasted exactly 47 minutes. The time it took me to drag her corpse behind a concrete barrier and cover it with construction tarps and steel pipes. Then reality crashed down like a collapsing building, and I realized that solving one problem had created a dozen others that were infinitely worse. My hands shook uncontrollably as I attempted to clean blood from the steel pipe using bottled water from my car. Every shadow seemed to hide surveillance cameras. Every distant sound suggested approaching security guards. Every car that passed on the nearby road might contain witnesses who had seen my Range Rover entering the construction site. The confident executive who had planned this meeting had been replaced by a panicking amateur criminal who was making crucial mistakes with every passing minute. I drove home through Dubai's late-night traffic like a man navigating through a dream. The familiar route felt foreign. The city lights seemed too bright, and every police car I encountered sent my heart rate into dangerous territory. When I finally pulled into our driveway in Arabian Ranches, I sat in the car for 10 minutes trying to compose myself before facing Layla and the children. "You're home late," Layla observed when I entered through the kitchen door. "How did the client meeting go?" "Fine," I managed, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Just some complicated contract negotiations that ran longer than expected. For 3 days, I maintained the illusion that life could continue normally. I attended meetings, reviewed project reports, even participated in a presentation to potential investors. But underneath this facade of professional competence, I was monitoring news reports obsessively, waiting for the inevitable discovery that would transform me from a successful businessman into a murder suspect. The call came on Friday morning. "Mr. Al-Mansouri," said the voice on my office phone. "This is Detective Hassan Al-Zabi with Dubai Police. We need to speak with you regarding a missing person investigation." Nadia's roommates had reported her disappearance when she failed to return home for 3 consecutive nights without explanation. Her supervisor at Emerald Heights had confirmed that she hadn't called in sick or requested time off. Phone records showed that her last communication had been a text message exchange with me on the evening of October 15th. "We understand you had professional interactions with Ms. Kassab," Detective Al-Zabi continued. "Can you come to the station this afternoon to help us understand her recent state of mind?" I agreed to the interview with the artificial confidence of someone who believed he could outsmart the investigation. My plan was simple: acknowledge the professional mentoring relationship while completely denying any personal involvement. I would express appropriate concern about her disappearance and offer to help however possible. That strategy collapsed within 15 minutes of arriving at the police station. Detective Al-Zabi was a seasoned investigator who had handled hundreds of cases involving workplace relationships, domestic violence, and crimes of passion. He had already reviewed surveillance footage from multiple locations, analyzed phone records dating back 6 months, and interviewed several Emerald Heights employees who had observed my interactions with Nadia. "Mr. Al-Mansouri," he said, sliding a folder across the interview table. "These are photographs from security cameras at the Jumeirah Beach Hotel, the Atlantis Resort, and 3 different restaurants in Marina Walk. They show you and Ms. Kassab together on numerous occasions between March and October. Would you like to revise your statement about the nature of your relationship?" The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Worse, Detective Al-Zabi had traced my Range Rover to the construction site on the night of October 15th through traffic cameras and automated toll systems that I hadn't even considered during my panic planning. "We found her body this morning," he continued, his tone remaining professionally neutral. "Severe head trauma from repeated blows with a blunt object. The construction site where she was discovered belongs to your company, Mr. Al-Mansouri. You had access, you had motive, and you were the last person to communicate with her." Faced with irrefutable evidence and the growing certainty that denial would only make my situation worse, I confessed. The relief of finally telling the truth about the affair, the HIV diagnosis, and the escalating threats felt like removing a weight that had been crushing me for months. But this emotional release came with the immediate realization that my life as I had known it was permanently over. The arrest made headlines in Arabic-language newspapers, though privacy laws prevented the publication of many details about the HIV aspect of the case. Layla learned about the affair and my diagnosis simultaneously, through a police notification that she needed to be tested for potential exposure. Mercifully, her tests came back negative. My recent avoidance of intimacy had inadvertently protected her health. But the emotional damage was catastrophic and irreversible. Our marriage ended immediately, not through formal divorce proceedings, but through the simple impossibility of maintaining any relationship after such massive deception. The children were told that Daddy had made terrible mistakes and would be going away for a long time. In March 2020, I was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. 25 years minimum, with the possibility of parole if I demonstrated genuine remorse and rehabilitation. The successful executive who had once managed multimillion dirham projects now manages the daily routine of prison life, where respect is earned through entirely different metrics than the ones that had previously defined my worth. As I sit in my prison cell today, 5 years after that October night when everything fell apart, I've had countless hours to analyze the decisions that destroyed multiple families and ended a young woman's life. The man who committed that murder feels like a stranger to me now, but I know that understanding how I became him is the only way to honor Nadia's memory and perhaps prevent others from walking the same destructive path. The first lesson I learned too late is that success without character is not just meaningless, it's dangerous. I had built an impressive career, accumulated wealth, and gained social status, but I had never developed the moral foundation necessary to handle temptation when it appeared. When faced with the choice between doing what was right and doing what felt good, I consistently chose immediate gratification over long-term integrity. This reveals a deeper truth about how small compromises lead to massive catastrophes. The affair didn't begin with a decision to cheat on my wife. It started with a decision to have just one coffee meeting that felt slightly inappropriate. The murder didn't begin with a plan to kill Nadia. It started with a decision to meet her in a secluded location while my emotions were unstable and my rational thinking was compromised. Every major disaster in our lives can be traced back to a series of smaller choices that seemed manageable at the time. We tell ourselves we can control dangerous situations, that we're smart enough to take calculated risks without facing serious consequences. But moral compromises have their own momentum, and once that momentum builds, it becomes exponentially harder to change direction. Fear-based decision-making compounds these problems in devastating ways. When I learned about the HIV diagnosis, I had a clear choice: confess everything to Layla, get her tested immediately, and face the consequences of my actions like an adult. Instead, I chose deception based on fear of losing my comfortable life. That choice put my wife's health at risk, and consider how different this story would be if I had made brave choices instead of fearful ones. If I had ended the affair when it began affecting my marriage. If I had confessed the HIV diagnosis when I learned about it. If I had sought professional help when the blackmail and threats began overwhelming my mental stability. Courage in small moments prevents catastrophes in big moments. The ripple effects of my actions extend far beyond my own punishment. Nadia's parents in Lebanon buried their daughter, whose dreams of building a successful life in Dubai died with her in that construction site. My children lost their father to prison and live with the shame of having a murderer in their family tree. Layla struggled for years to rebuild her life while processing the betrayal and deception that had characterized our marriage's final months. These consequences remind us that our actions never affect only ourselves. Every choice we make sends ripples through the lives of people who trust us, depend on us, or simply exist in our orbit. The responsibility we bear for these ripple effects should inform every decision we make about honesty, loyalty, and moral courage. Before I end this story, let me ask you directly, what small compromise are you currently making that might lead to bigger problems? What truth are you avoiding that needs to be addressed before it grows into something unmanageable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story has given you something to think about, make sure to subscribe to Cold Case Reveals for more true crime stories that expose the real consequences of our choices. Because in the end, we all have the power to choose differently.